Hi, today's teaching is False Christs and False Prophets. This is second in the series on eschatology or end times. The first was entitled Jesus' Last Days Prophecy. In that lesson we learned that everything that is in Matthew 24 was linked to the destruction of Jerusalem and to the destruction of the temple. Jesus twice referred to this generation. We found that one generation in the Hebrew meaning was either 40 years or 100 years. And we found that everything that Jesus prophesied was fulfilled exactly in 40 years, that's 70 CE, and then finally in 130 CE when every stone was removed of the foundations. In Matthew 24 we find, "For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever will be." There are two references by Jesus in Matthew 24 to false Christs and prophets. First of all, in verse 5, it says, "For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many." And then in verses 23 to 26, "Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out, or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it." Jesus placing the time of these false Christs and false prophets is between two references to one generation. Firstly, Matthew 23 verse 36, "Assuredly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation." So that's before the two references to false Christs and prophets. And then afterwards, verse 34, "Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all of these things have happened." In other words, Jesus is saying that false Christs and prophets will peak sometime between AD 30 and AD 70, or 30 CE and 70 CE. The epistles confirm that false Christs and prophets were found in that first 40 years. Writing somewhere between 62 and 67 CE, the Apostle John says this, 1 John 4 verse 1, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world." Then the Apostle Peter, before his death in the mid-60s CE, says this, "But there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false prophets amongst you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destructions." Now, I'm not saying that things that are in the Bible cannot be referenced today. Of course they can, but we must remember that primarily Peter was writing to the people of that time that were about to go into the Great Tribulation or had just entered the Great Tribulation, and John was saying the same thing. We will look at the Great Tribulation at a later stage, but let me just read to you what Jesus said in regard to the Great Tribulation. Remembering this is Matthew 24 verse 21, that again is between the two parentheses, the two references to one generation. "For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time," the time of this generation. "No, nor ever will be again." So if you hear of a great tribulation coming in the future, you can disregard it, because Jesus said it will never happen again. In fact, if people say about a future great tribulation, then they are making Jesus out to be a false prophet. Now, obviously, that is not the intention, but that is what they are saying. So were false Christs and prophets successful? Let's see what Matthew 24 verse 24 says. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. And so for the false Christs and prophets to be successful, as Jesus predicted, then the elect would have had to have been deceived as a result of the false teaching. Did that occur? Yes, it did. The false teaching of that time was Gnosticism. Gnosticism teaches that Jesus never came in the flesh. It teaches that Joseph and Mary had sex and Jesus was born naturally. Gnosticism believes that the earthly world is corrupt and furthermore that sex inside of marriage is evil. It is said that 1/3 of Christianity was deceived by Gnosticism by the year 150 CE. The leading theologian or the leading apostle against Gnosticism is the Apostle John. The Apostle John, it is said of him by Eusebius, the historian, that on entering a bathhouse he saw one of the leaders of the Gnostics, Cerinthus, and he turned around and walked straight out of that bathhouse as a result. So do we find evidence of Jesus refuting Gnosticism? Yes. John 1 verse 1 to 2 and then also in verse 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. John further identifies Gnosticism as the spirit of Antichrist. Let me read this to you. 1 John chapter 4 verses 1 to 3. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess that Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and is now already in the world. We have another teaching on the Antichrist for you to go into this in greater detail. So Jesus' prophecy concerning a great apostasy was indeed fulfilled in that generation. Are there historical writings that confirm false Christs and false prophets? I'm going to give you a few of the example. There are many more. 34 CE, Dositheus the Samaritan claimed to be the Messiah. 37 CE, a Samaritan joined together an armed multitude, saying he had found the sacred utensils of Moses. His disciples called him the Messiah, and Pilate killed him under Cuspius Fadus sometime 44 to 46 CE. 52 to 60 under Felix, false prophets and false Christ appeared nearly daily, deceiving many, luring people out into the desert just as Jesus prophesied he would do. 55 CE, another person named Felix gathered 30,000 people to him, went up to the Mount of Olives, saying that he would see the walls of Jerusalem fall at his command. And of course we know that never happened for another 15 years, not at his command, but at the command of Titus. 66 CE, a further false prophet deceived the people, saying that his followers would defeat the Romans if they followed him into the desert. Alas, for the followers, they didn't. The Romans massacred them as a result. And so we find that the prophecy of Jesus concerning false Christs and false prophets is accurate. He said it would happen within one generation, and it did. So in summary then, Jesus' prophecy was correct. The apostles wrote in the epistles that false prophets in Christ did indeed come in that first generation. Gnosticism is referred to as the spirit of Antichrist, and 1/3 of the church was deceived by this false teaching. John the Apostle was the theologian that spoke against Gnosticism, and non-biblical historical writings confirm Jesus' prophecy that all of these things would happen within one generation. Therefore, there is no reason to quote Matthew 24, verses 4 to 34, to fulfill some rhetoric about the coming great tribulation and about false Christs and false prophets today. Of course, there will be false Christs and false prophets. That happens through all generations. And in fact, for those of you who have been watching Christian TV, unfortunately, COVID has brought out many false prophecies and many who have drawn followers to themselves as a result of false prophecy. Next, in Wars and Rumors of Wars, we will look how within one generation that Jesus' prophecy again was correct, and that there was no other time in history that was more catastrophic for the Jews, including World War II.